What if the next summer night out isn't just another memory? At night, the people you trust most can become unrecognizable. These stories aren't urban legends. They're drawn from true accounts, pieced together from messages, photos, and the voices of people who barely escaped. No footprints, no warning, just a nightmare that follows you home. Stay until story 3, where one summer evening nearly cost 2 friends their lives. Every detail you're about to hear comes from those who saw the familiar twist into something dangerous, sometimes in the space of a single conversation. Sometimes, the most ordinary moments hide the deepest threats. And sometimes, the person you meet by chance is carrying a secret you never want to uncover. The first time I met Matt, it was at a crowded bar on a humid July night. The Cubs game was on, and he slid into the seat next to me just as the crowd erupted over a double play. He was quick with a joke, the kind of person who could make small talk feel like an inside joke between old friends. When we swapped Instagram handles, it felt like the natural next step. He seemed familiar, someone you'd trust to watch your drink if you stepped away. Later that night, scrolling through his feed, I saw the usual. Hiking shots, city skylines, group photos with friends, a few travel reels. Everything about him seemed open, easy, and unremarkable in the best possible way. We started hanging out regularly, trivia nights, movie marathons, late walks in the city when the air was thick with summer heat. Matt was always up for something, and his energy made even the most ordinary plans seem like a break from routine. He remembered the little things, my go-to drink order, the old band t-shirt I wore on laundry days, the fact that I couldn't stand cilantro. There was nothing in those first weeks that set off alarms. He was curious, sure, asking about my family, or what I did on weekends, but it all felt like the normal rhythm of getting to know someone. The first odd moment came quietly. One night, after a trivia game, Matt and I crashed at my place. I woke up early, groggy, and noticed my phone wasn't where I'd left it charging on the nightstand. It was unplugged and set neatly on the desk across the room. I chalked it up to sleepwalking or maybe knocking it over in the night. Matt was already up, making coffee, and when I asked if he'd moved my phone, he just shrugged and said he hadn't noticed. I let it go. It was a small thing, easy to explain away. A week later, he suggested a road trip out west. Arizona, he said. Sedona, Flagstaff, the Grand Canyon. He'd mapped out the route, marked places to stop, and even found a hotel with a pool. The idea sounded perfect, a chance to break out of the city and do something different. I agreed without hesitation. The days leading up to the trip were filled with messages back and forth, playlists shared, snacks planned. It felt like the kind of summer adventure you always talk about but rarely pull off. We hit the road early, singing along to bad pop songs and sharing stories as the landscape changed from concrete to desert. The first night we checked into a small hotel outside Sedona. Matt was in high spirits, cracking jokes and flipping channels until we both crashed. The next morning I found my phone had been unplugged again, moved to the dresser this time. I asked if he'd needed to use it, and he just grinned, saying he must have bumped it by accident. His answer was casual, but something about it felt rehearsed. The days blurred together, hiking red rocks, eating takeout by the pool, long drives with nothing but static on the radio. Matt's questions grew more pointed. He wanted to know who I was texting, what my lock screen code was, if I used any location sharing apps. He'd laugh it off, but the repetition felt odd. Sometimes he'd sit too close, glancing at my phone when it buzzed. If I moved to another room, he'd follow, always with an excuse, a refill, a joke, a question about the next day's plans. By the second night, I started keeping my wallet and phone in my bag, zipped up and tucked under my pillow. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the sense of unease kept building. After dinner, Matt suggested we stay up and watch a movie, but I was exhausted. I locked my phone, set it on the nightstand, and turned away, hoping sleep would come quickly. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a low metallic rattle, the air conditioner sputtering in the window. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I instinctively reached for my phone. It was gone. I sat up, confused, and that's when I saw Matt at the foot of the bed. He wasn't moving, just standing there, rubbing his foot against the carpet, his arms loose at his sides. The smile on his face was thin, unfocused, like he was waiting for something. I asked if everything was okay. He didn't answer right away, just kept rubbing his foot, staring in my direction. The silence dragged on until he finally said, "Didn't mean to wake you." His tone was flat, almost bored. My phone reappeared on the nightstand by morning, plugged in as if nothing had happened. As I lay there, half asleep, a gnawing chill told me something wasn't just off. It was dangerous. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. When I heard the faint click of the hotel door as Matt stepped out for ice or a smoke, he never said which, I realized I was wide awake, every muscle tense. The rest of the night I barely moved, just listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the distant sounds of cars passing on the highway. Some summer nights don't fade with the sunrise. They linger, leaving questions that don't have easy answers, and a wariness that follows you into the next story. Ocean City, Maryland, draws a certain kind of crowd in the summer. The boardwalk buzzes, the air is thick with salt and laughter, and the beach stretches out, promising an easy escape from the routines waiting back home. For Kyle, Jason, and Marcus, it was supposed to be a break. Just friends shaking off the weight of looming exams, walking the shoreline after the crowds thinned and the arcade lights faded into the distance. The sand was cool and the world felt smaller, their voices lost in the steady hush of the water. No one was in a hurry to turn in. They walked, letting the city's glow fall behind them, until the only light left was the moon and the thin beam from Jason's flashlight. They didn't notice how far they'd wandered until the laughter faded, replaced by the quiet that settles when you realize you're alone. The boardwalk's noise was gone, replaced by the rhythmic pull of the tide. That's when Marcus stopped, his voice low. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing ahead. At first it looked like a shadow fixed at the edge of the wet sand, right where the surf met the shore. The figure stood perfectly still, just beyond the reach of the moonlight, and for a moment, nobody said a word. It was easy to imagine it was just another person out for a late walk, maybe lost in their thoughts or waiting for someone. But the longer they watched, the less sense it made. The figure didn't shift its weight, didn't sway in the breeze. It was as if it had been planted there, unmoving, almost part of the landscape. The friends slowed, their voices dropping to whispers, each step forward matched by a growing hesitation. Jason gripped the flashlight tighter, the beam wavering a little as he tried to get a better view. "Weird," he muttered, forcing a laugh that didn't land. They edged away from the water, but the urge to look back was impossible to resist. The figure remained, a silhouette against the silvered sand, until suddenly, it moved. The motion was wrong, stiff, halting, almost mechanical. Its legs seemed to struggle with the idea of walking, as if every step was new. The arms hung at its sides, not swinging, not even flexing, and the head drooped at an unnatural angle, chin nearly touching its chest. Each movement was jerky, out of sync with the slow rhythm of the waves. For a fleeting second, Jason wondered if it was part of some elaborate prank. Then the light revealed the impossible. He flicked on the flashlight, and the beam cut across the sand, catching the figure full in the face. The skin was the first thing he noticed, grayish-white, not pale in the way of someone who'd spent too much time indoors, but flat and lifeless, almost as if it absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. The figure wore jeans, soaked and clinging to its legs, dark patches marking where the water had yet to dry. The shirt was torn and damp, hanging off one shoulder, stained and stretched as if it had been dragged through the surf for hours. But it was the face that made Jason's hand drop, breath caught in his throat. The eyes were wide, bulging, set too far in their sockets, and even though the head was still tilted down, those eyes seemed to look everywhere at once. Marcus swore under his breath and grabbed Kyle's arm, urging him to back away. "Don't," he whispered, barely audible, as if any sudden noise might break whatever spell held the figure in place. They started to retreat, slow and careful, eyes never leaving the shape by the water. The beach felt endless, the distance between them and safety suddenly impossible to measure. The figure stopped its awkward walk and froze. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. The waves, the wind, the three friends standing in the dark, and the thing that watched them. Then, without warning, it moved again. Gone was the slow, mechanical shuffle. The figure broke into a sprint, legs driving hard, kicking up wet sand with every step. Its arms stayed rigid at its sides, barely bending, the head still angled down. There was no sound but the rush of feet through the surf and the friends' startled shouts as they turned to run. The flashlight slipped from Jason's hand and hit the ground, its beams spinning wildly, throwing shadows across the dunes. In that instant, everything narrowed to the single, primal urge to escape. The world behind them vanished. There was only the pounding of their own footsteps, the drag of the sand, and the knowledge that something was chasing them. Something that shouldn't move the way it did, that shouldn't look the way it did. The sprint from the shoreline to the safety of the boardwalk became a blur, every second stretched by the fear that whatever was behind them was gaining ground. The moment hangs there. Three friends running for their lives, the beach behind them no longer a place of comfort, but something transformed by the presence of a figure that defied explanation. In the aftermath, the ordinary sounds of summer, waves, laughter, the distant hum of the boardwalk, would never feel quite the same. The memory of that night, and the sprint that broke the silence, would linger, settling in just beneath the surface. Some settings never lose their stillness, but sometimes the quiet hides something waiting to break through. Some nights on the water seem built for forgetting the world. Just the low hum of an old boat drifting, a soft breeze, and the faint echo of music rolling out across the dark. That's how it started for me and Emerson. We wanted quiet, nothing more than a break from city noise and the press of deadlines. The lake was wide and still. I let the boat idle while Emerson leaned back, hat pulled low, the last streaks of daylight fading behind us. The only sound was the gentle slap of water against the hull. We weren't far from the center of the lake when Emerson sat up, his eyes fixed on a patch of darkness just off our starboard side. "There's a boat out there," he said, voice lower than usual. I followed his gaze and caught the silhouette, a small craft, sitting dead in the water, running lights off. Three figures stood close at the bow, unmoving, faces impossible to see. At first I chalked it up to other night fishermen, or maybe a group just soaking up the quiet. Still, something about their stillness pressed at the edge of my mind. The figures didn't move, didn't talk, didn't even seem to shift their weight. They just stared. It was a kind of attention that makes you feel exposed, even at a distance. I tried to shake it off, cracking a weak joke about lake neighbors and waving my drink in their direction. Emerson didn't respond. He kept glancing between me and the other boat, his posture tense. It was the kind of unease you feel in your gut before your mind can catch up. We sat like that for a long minute, our boat drifting, their boat anchored in shadow. I could hear the playlist still playing, but the sound felt far away, muffled by the growing tension. The distance between us was just enough for plausible deniability, but the way they watched made it clear. We weren't alone, and we weren't welcome. I tried to ignore the feeling. "Probably just curious," I said, forcing a laugh. The words tasted wrong. Emerson shook his head, not taking his eyes off the figures. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered. His voice clipped. I shrugged, unwilling to admit that the hair on my arms had started to rise. That's when I decided to push back. I grabbed the orange megaphone we kept for emergencies, pressed the button, and let my voice carry across the water. $20 to watch, fellas," I shouted, the static swallowing the last word. Emerson shot me a look, part disbelief, part warning, but I was still holding on to the idea that this was nothing more than a weird encounter on a summer night. For a second, nothing changed. Then, one of the three figures stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The movement was so measured it felt rehearsed. I watched as the figure paused at the edge of the boat, and then, without a word, there was a splash, sharp and sudden. Before I could process it, a second splash followed. Two of them were in the water, swimming directly toward us. Emerson's reaction was immediate. He lunged for the anchor line, hands moving fast, voice low and urgent. "Pull it up, now." I froze, still trying to fit what I was seeing into a reasonable explanation. Was this a prank? Some kind of dare? But the way those swimmers cut through the water, heads low, arms slicing with purpose, made it clear this wasn't about fun. What do you do when the people you think are strangers decide to invade your personal space at 2 a.m.? My mind spun as I watched the two figures gain ground, the third left behind on their boat, still standing at the bow, unmoving. Emerson hauled at the anchor, rope burning through his hands. I fumbled with the ignition, my fingers slipping, the engine stubborn for a heartbeat before it caught. The swimmers were closer now, maybe 20 yards out, their shapes barely visible in the dim light. There was no shouting, no laughter, just the steady churn of water and the growing sense that whatever was coming, we weren't prepared for it. I could see their arms flash in the reflection from our running lights, each stroke closing the distance. Emerson yanked the anchor free, collapsing onto the deck, breath ragged. I slammed the throttle forward, the engine roaring too loud in the night. The boat lurched, water spraying up in our wake. I risked a glance back and saw one swimmer almost at the stern, reaching for the spot where our anchor had just been. My heart hammered. Emerson crouched low, eyes locked on the water behind us, ready for anything. The third figure remained on their boat, a dark outline against the night, watching as if waiting for something to play out. But the chase wasn't over. The other boat's motor fired up, a guttural roar that cut through the noise. Their bow swung wide, angling across our path. I realized then that this wasn't just about the swimmers, who were now falling behind, but about the boat itself, faster and newer than ours. Emerson barked directions, voice tight. "Left, get close to the shore." I steered hard, the shoreline blurring in my peripheral vision, trees looming in the dark. They were gaining on us faster than any drunk prankster should, which is when I realized this wasn't a joke. Trust is an easy thing to give when the surface seems calm. We rarely expect danger to surface in the middle of what feels routine. A new friend at a bar, a late-night walk along the shore, a boat ride on a calm lake. These are moments built for comfort, not caution. But sometimes, the most ordinary encounters turn on a dime, and what you thought was safe becomes something you can't explain away. Hidden dangers in everyday life don't always wear a mask or announce themselves with a threat. More often, they slip in quietly, testing the edges of your awareness, waiting for you to shrug them off. If there's a thread running through each of these stories, it's the voice inside that tries to warn you before your mind catches up. The man who met Matt sensed something was off before he could name it. A look that lingered too long. A question that cut a little too deep. A phone moved when it shouldn't have been. He wanted to believe he was overthinking, that a friend's quirks were harmless. But when he woke to find Matt standing at the foot of his bed, the truth hit hard and fast. That was the moment when instinct stopped being a whisper and became a lifeline. Have you ever brushed off a warning sign, only to regret it later? The group on the beach felt the shift too. What started as a night of laughter and ocean air changed the moment they saw the figure by the water. At first, they told themselves it was nothing, a lost tourist maybe, or someone out for a walk. But the way that figure moved, the way it stood too still and then broke into a sprint, forced them to trust their fear. When they ran, it wasn't just nerves, it was survival. How many times have you tried to explain away that creeping sense that something isn't right? On the lake, Emerson didn't wait for proof. He saw the other boat, the three silent figures, and felt the wrongness settle in his gut. When two of them slipped into the water and began swimming toward their boat, he acted, pulling up anchor and urging his friend to get moving. There was no time to debate the odds or reason out intentions. Sometimes you only get one chance to listen to your gut. Have you ever had a split-second decision that made all the difference? Each of these moments is a reminder that instincts are not just background noise. They're the body's early warning system, honed by experience and something deeper. It's tempting to ignore them, to let politeness or doubt override that signal. But in the stories you've heard tonight, that small voice was the only thing standing between safety and disaster. Tell us in the comments which story made your skin crawl the most. Long after the danger passed, the impact lingered. The man who trusted Matt couldn't shake the feeling that he'd missed something obvious. Every detail replayed in his mind. What he said, what he didn't say, the signs he ignored. The group from the beach found the memory of that sprint chasing them into their dreams, the figure on the sand never quite leaving their thoughts. For the friends on the lake, the question of what those strangers wanted kept them up at night, the uncertainty gnawing at the comfort they once felt on the water. Sometimes, it's not the event itself, but the aftermath, the way your mind circles back, searching for answers you'll never get. That leaves the deepest mark. Most of us want to believe we're good judges of character and situation. We like to think we'd know if something was wrong, that we'd spot the danger before it's too late. But the truth is, we all miss things. We all have moments where we talk ourselves out of what we're feeling, convinced that we're just being dramatic or paranoid. That moment when you know your gut was right can be the hardest to accept. What do these stories say about the world we move through every day? They aren't just warnings, they're proof that the line between normal and nightmare is thin, and it can blur with no warning at all. You don't have to be in the middle of nowhere or surrounded by strangers to find yourself in trouble. Sometimes it's the friend you thought you knew, the beach you've walked 100 times, the lake you've always trusted to keep its secrets. It's easy to look back and see what you should have done differently. Maybe you wish you'd left the bar earlier, or turned around on the beach, or pulled up anchor the moment you felt uneasy. But most of the time, You only get clarity in hindsight. The real challenge is learning to act before that moment comes, to trust your instincts even when you can't justify them to anyone else. One story stands out for the way fear followed the narrator long after the night ended. The man who escaped Matt's unsettling presence found himself haunted by the memory, second-guessing every friendly face he met afterward. He questioned his own judgment, replaying the details for weeks, searching for the moment where things shifted from safe to dangerous. That kind of doubt is hard to shake. It lingers, reshaping the way you see the people and places around you. Have you ever been in a situation where something felt off, but you stayed anyway? Did you later wish you'd trusted that feeling sooner? These stories aren't just about rare, extreme moments. They're about the decisions we make every day, the times we choose comfort over caution. Sometimes the cost of ignoring your instincts is small, a story you tell with a laugh, a lesson learned. Other times, it's the difference between walking away and becoming a headline. The world is full of moments where danger hides in plain sight. You can't always spot it by looking for something out of place. Sometimes it's a pattern that doesn't fit, a silence that feels a little too heavy, a stranger who stands just a little too close. It's the ordinary that turns, without warning, into something you never saw coming. If you take anything from these stories, let it be this: don't wait for proof when your instincts are already sounding the alarm. Don't let the comfort of the familiar keep you from seeing what's really there. The people in these stories didn't ask for trouble. They weren't looking for horror. But when it came, the only thing that kept them safe was the willingness to listen to that uneasy feeling, no matter how small, no matter how easy it was to dismiss. So next time you're out with friends, or meeting someone new, or just enjoying a quiet night, pay attention to what your instincts are telling you. Notice the way your heart rate changes, the way your skin prickles, the way a room suddenly feels colder. Those signals are there for a reason. They're the difference between a close call and something worse. We all want to believe we'd do the right thing if danger came close. But the right thing isn't always obvious until it's too late. Maybe that's the real lesson behind these stories, that the world doesn't always announce its threats, and sometimes the only warning you get is the one you give yourself. As you think back on these encounters, consider what you would have done in their place. Would you have trusted your instincts, or would you have convinced yourself everything was fine? The answer isn't always clear, but the question is worth asking. And as we move forward, remember, the ordinary isn't always as harmless as it seems. Sometimes what hides behind a smile, a shadow, or a stretch of calm water is more than you bargained for. The next time you find yourself alone with your thoughts, or with someone you barely know, ask yourself, what would you do if the night started to change? Not all threats announce themselves with a crash or a scream. Sometimes they hide in the ordinary, a friendly face, a quiet stretch of beach, or the comfort of a summer night. Most dangers whisper, not roar. The stories tonight show just how quickly the ground can shift, how a friend, a stranger, or a quiet place can unravel into something you never expected. The people who walked away did so because they listened to that uneasy feeling, acted before doubt could talk them out of it, and questioned what didn't sit right. So ask yourself, when was the last time you trusted your gut, even when it made no sense? Will you trust your instincts next time? If these stories rattled you, share this video to warn others, and subscribe for more real-world encounters, because the next time that shadow moves in the corner of your eye, you might just save your own story